is the all-new for 2025 MSR Hubba Hubba LT1 that has a bunch of updates from the previous generation. I've been testing this for the past several months and I want to talk about it. A few months ago, MSR sent this tent to me to test in the field, get some experience with, and then share that experience with you guys here on the channel. This was provided for free from MSR for me to do that testing. This is not sponsored by them. No money was exchanged to make the video. And I want to share my honest thoughts and feelings of this tent because there's some things that I really like about this, but there's also some things that I'm like, I wish were a little bit different. So let's dig into the specs of the tent here first, starting with price point. And that's going to be the first con of this tent. This is an expensive tent. For a one-person size tent, it's $470 USD. That is up there in price, flirting with $500 for a tent that is made out of a nylon ripstop fabric. Now this is a 20 denier outer fly and a 20 denier floor, and that has a 1200 millimeter hydrostatic head on the fly and an 1800 millimeter hydrostatic head on the floor, which I believe is sufficient for most people unless you are in a very, very, very rainy scenario, and then of course maybe you're going to want something with a higher than 2000 millimeter hydrostatic head. At $470 makes this an expensive nylon tent. When you compare it to like the Nemo Dragonfly that's using the Osmo fabric, that's a nylon and polyester blend, you get the benefits of the polyester fiber in that fabric. But then when you also compare it to like the Tarp Tent Rainbow or the newly announced Durston X Dome, this is significantly higher in price. The Rainbow from Tarp Tent is a full $200 less than this tent, and it's lighter weight and it has a larger floor space. So let's talk about the dimensions of the tent. The length of the tent is 88 inches long, it is 32 inches wide, and it is a fully symmetrical rectangular floor, which I like to see, especially in a one-person tent. Compared to like the Dragonfly from Nemo, for example, that has a tapered foot end that goes from 35 inches to 32 inches and weighs basically the same as this tent here. You also have a peak height of 39 inches for the LT1 here, which is plenty of space for you to sit up and move around in the tent. And it's also double walled and it is fully freestanding. So your pole structure comes out to all four corners. You have a nice brow pole. So it makes for a very livable, enjoyable tent that way. Now, additionally, the fabric of the tent here is using a solution dyed fabric, which reduces the amount of water that is used to dye the fabric. It's a more sustainable approach to the tent as well. And they've also changed the pole structure of the tent to now use a DAC NFL aluminum pole as opposed to the Cyclone Easton pole that was used on the previous generation. That we'll talk about here in a second as a little issue that I had with the tent early on with the pole set. But here on the ends of the tent, you have two vents. There's a vent here and a vent at the other end, and there is ample space around the bottom of the fly sheet that allows for really good airflow and ventilation within the tent. You've got guy out points at all different types of places to make this a really stable and strong tent in the rain and such and the winds, but it's not going to really hold much snow or be something that I would rely on as being able to take any kind of snow load for a 4-season setting. So this would be definitely a 3-season focused tent, but I think the structure of it and the build of it definitely lends itself to being something that I would rely on to handle really any kind of weather conditions I would find myself in 3-season settings. But what you've got here on the outer fly of the tent is still that rain gutter system that you are familiar with on the Hubba Hubba series of tents that does help reduce the amount of water that can be introduced to the inside of the tent with water coming off of the top of the rainfly here, and that gutter runs all the way down to the bottom. I have not had this out in a really heavy rainstorm, so I cannot speak to how effective that is, but it should be sufficient enough to make it so that I can get in and out of the tent without a bunch of water going to the inside of the tent. Now the doorway opening of this is much larger than the previous generation Hubba Hubba that I have, where it felt pretty crammed getting into that small zipper opening. The zippers come down to the corner of the fly, which makes it really nice to get in and out without having to reach all the way out to the edge of the vestibule here to unzip, have the door fall down into your face. It just is a bit more convenient, and I like that a lot about the design of the Hubba Hubba. What I don't like about the door here for the fly sheet for the vestibule is this is as much as I can open it. I don't have the ability to roll back and tie back this part of the fly of the door to increase ventilation opportunity, but it would be nice to be able to roll it back all the way, and I still can't do that with the tent. But the fact that I reach down to the corner of the tent, zip it up, and I don't have to fall out of the tent to unzip it is really nice. The vestibule space of the tent is also, it's mid. It's not super excellent, but it is a one-person size tent, but it is one door, one vestibule only. So I don't have any space on the back side of the tent for me to put any gear and such. But on the inside, it's 88 inches long, and you've got fairly vertical end walls. So I do have, I don't know, like 8 inches or so of space for me to put gear at the foot end of the tent for some added gear storage when I'm inside. And then lastly, with the inner of the tent, what you have is a solid piece of fabric that comes up really high to the side of the tent that I personally love to see in the design of a backpacking tent. I spend so much time in the desert where it gets windy and the sand just blows and spin drifts under the vestibule and around the tent, and this helps keep the amount of sand and dirt from blowing through the mesh and going into the tent and making a mess and everything getting covered. But compared to the previous generation Hubba Hubba, this is more mesh than you are used to seeing, and so it's a nice balance of solid fabric to reduce the amount of dirt that goes in, but also increase the ventilation compared to the previous generation. So now the inside of the tent here is fairly roomy for a one-person size tent. Like I mentioned before, it has a rectangular floor, which does make it feel a bit more open, and it makes it easy for you to sleep at either end of the tent based off of how you orient the door so that you are sleeping with your head uphill, which I like to see. Sometimes when a one-person tent or a two-person tent has a tapered floor, it makes it hard for you to switch which end of the tent you sleep in. And because this door opening is so big, it makes it easier for me to get into the tent on this side if I need to, and just get in and out of the tent, not have to worry about this is a dedicated head end, this is a dedicated foot end. The inside of the tent for organization and getting gear up off the ground is really good. There are two big mesh pockets at the ends of the tent that have space for pretty much anything that you would need to put in there, plus two pockets at the top of the tent. Very often with one-person sized tents, you are limited in the storage space that you have inside. So I love to see big pockets that are up above the ground and aren't just for little tiny knick-knack things. But that 32-inch width floor, that is a minimum width that I would want ever for a one-person tent. It makes it, if you have to spend a lot of time in here, kind of claustrophobic. But because it is freestanding and there is good height, it doesn't feel like you're in a coffin and really, really tight like some non-freestanding tents are, where the walls come down really steep against your face and they're not as comfortable that way. So now that I've had some experience out in the field with this tent, in the desert, out in the mountains, in various conditions, what are the other things that I don't like about it and things that I do like about it? Let's talk about the issue that I had with the pole set early on with the tent. That I don't know if it was totally my doing or if it was just a bad pole set, but what happened is here on the hub of the pole, it broke. Like, I don't know if it was already cracked, if it was a problem of me just not having the pole seat correctly, but I did have the pole break at that spot, which is an odd spot for me. I've never had a pole have an issue at the hub like that. So that is what it is. MSR took care of it. I don't think that it is an issue for anybody to worry about that would be buying this tent, but I mention it because it is something that happened to me out in the field. The other thing that I'll just mention again is I really think that this tent just costs too much money. $470 for a one-person tent is a lot of money to spend. And again, one that is made from a nylon fabric. A lot of people like to poo-poo on nylon. I still think that nylon is a great tent fabric and isn't something that we should totally poo-poo on, but there are so many other tents out there on the market that are significantly less money and lighter weight than this that would be as great or better than this as an option as a one-person tent. So I would genuinely like to see MSR be able to reduce the cost of this, even by like $50 to $100 to make it more approachable. Because like I mentioned before, the Tarp Tent Rainbow that has a polyester body, it is single walled, but it is lighter weight and it is $200 less money than this, and it has a bigger floor space than this. That is huge for me, and it would be a reason for me to not buy the Hubba Hubba. But I do love the freestanding aspect of this. I love the quality of it. The just overall design works in so many different situations for me out in the desert where I can't drive stakes into the ground. I want a fully freestanding tent. This provides that opportunity. It's a very livable space inside, even though it's only 32 inches wide. It's just a really well-designed tent. It's the OG of this design, but that price point is just, it's just a bit too high for me, and I would love to see it down just a touch. But there you go. That is my initial thoughts and impressions over the last few months of use with the MSR Hubba Hubba LT that is new for 2025. Let me know down in the comments whether or not you think this is a good option for you or what other tent you would choose instead of this. Thanks for watching today, guys. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please do subscribe. I hope you have an awesome day. We'll catch you on the next one. See you later.